Hey, welcome to Lab, the podcast. First podcast of 2025, which is absolutely unreal to say 2025. And we're only a few days into it, but here with me, director of our lab initiative, Christina Kruse. Christina, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, everybody.
Yeah, it's amazing. You just said we're only 9 days in, and so much has happened even while we're recording this episode. California is like on fire. So by the time this airs, I think in a week or so, I'm praying that the destruction doesn't keep expanding. But right now, what a tragedy. So everybody's praying for everybody, friends, family, and for all the people in California. Just, it's tough. You have family out there? Matt was,
In Southern California in San Diego.
yeah,
So
out of the area.
far enough away that I don't think there's going to be any influence. So, but yeah, it's heartbreaking to see. I mean, it's one thing to have a forest fire, but to have a fire in like downtown, heavily populated areas, is like a whole other situation.
Yeah, it's a hard way to start the year. We were talking about too, just the strangeness of having fires in December. I mean, you have wildfires in the summer. All the West Coast really struggles with that all through the summer months. But to have like a December, January so dry, that it's scary. So hearts, prayers, thoughts, and anything that we can do, we're all thinking about and praying for everybody out in California. So. Um, 2025 and January is always, every time we enter a new year, we start with something that's really near and dear to V3's heart, because January is Human Trafficking Awareness Month. And so that's what's on the table for the conversation today. We're actually starting January with this conversation, and the whole month we're going to be talking to people about this issue and about the lab initiative. So maybe give us a quick glimpse. You know, a few of these conversations that are coming. We're going to start today kind of talking about the issue, and then what's next for the rest of the month.
Then we have a wonderful interview with the RAFA organization. So it's a newer organization for us to get a chance to talk to. I believe it's based out of Missouri. So you talk about one side of the country getting fires. So Missouri, I'm pretty sure they're snowed in, at least my friends I've
Right now,
talked to
for
in
sure.
Kansas and Missouri. So the dichotomy of what goes on in our country is pretty crazy. But you're going to be able to talk to Stephanie. And then later in the month, we're also going to hear from a board member of Oak Rock that we have been partnered with for the past year, which will be phenomenal to get an update from them and everything they've done. And then we're going to close out the month with an artist, a local artist over in St. Pete named Dee, and she is going to share her artwork around. She started with the Stations of the Cross, but now she has actually created a Station of the Cross for human trafficking. So it's just, as hard as human trafficking is, it is really powerful to see artwork come out of it, because I think when you see, I mean, we know V3 loves art. So when you see art, it really can be super impactful. And I think arts can almost push us further than like a photograph. So I think it's going to be a really cool month to see different organizations, hear some success stories, hear what's going on in the world, and then also like get that art influence. Because typically when I think human trafficking, I don't think art. So it's going to be an action-packed month of just awareness and learning about different organizations out there.
Yeah. Well, it's awesome. Thank you for the overview of that, but also all the work behind the scenes. And we'll talk a little bit about what was accomplished from an economic standpoint and from a partnership standpoint in 2024. But we're in your debt. You came on in November of 2023 and have really taken this and become the point person for V3's work to see the life and beauty of the gospel not just be an idea that we talk about, but an embodied reality. We always talk about that on the show, that the real win for V3, we were just talking about Simon Sinek's idea of a cause concept. Like, what's the dream for the work we're doing? And it's really that we would wondrously reveal Christianity and invite people to know God personally, and that power of the gospel would transform lives and would embody the way, or animate the way we live our embodied lives, and that there would be more life and more beauty in the world. And that doesn't just show up in art museums. It doesn't just show up in establishments that can curate and hold beautiful pieces of art. The life and beauty of the gospel springs up in the darkest and most devastating and most broken places like California, places like Hawaii, where the wildfires broke out, places where there is intense pain and suffering, even death and kenotic experiences. That's where you see these appearings of a turn and something unexpected where the power of God is able to come into an area and open a door of hope. So that's the lab initiative for us. We started it way back when in 2019 with this idea that as we talk about and advocate for and point to the life and beauty of the gospel in the world, that it wouldn't just be with words, but it would be with actions. And so we brought our team together and we said, where if we were to see the kind of the toughest place where the life and beauty of the gospel could spring up and just bring that beautiful turn of hope, where would it be? And obviously we're in a port city here in Tampa, and it was kind of on everybody's minds at the in that time, and it's continued to be, that human trafficking and the people who are victims and survivors of human trafficking would be the place where we would turn that beauty to good, right? And so you came on in 2023 to help us with that effort. How has your faith grown? How have you changed since kind of stepping into that role?
That's a really good question. I would say just to be part of the V3 like team as a whole has really pushed my faith. I think being a part of a group of people we're all very different, which I think is amazing. We all come from actually really diverse religious backgrounds, but to be on the same page and just to be able to bounce ideas off of one another. And then when we read those books you give us together, it's always great just to have that. And I think the sense of community is super strong. I think my role in particular, I don't have like the warm fuzzy role. Talking about human trafficking is not always the easiest thing to talk about, but I do really love that like I get to have the difficult conversations with people and to give them a bag of coffee or to do something to let people know there are ways that we can help, because I think we've talked about in another podcast like it can just seem like it's a mountain to climb, but I think God gives us all mountains for a reason, and really the only reason we can, you know, progress as humans, I think, is to climb those mountains. So I think for me, it's been awesome to see the generosity. I didn't know Dave and Susan Ward with Buddy Brew before this. And now I see them out at events or V3 events, or I'll see them at Buddy Brew, and they're always so warm and inviting. So it's been awesome to see like the community come together.
Mm.
And so I think my faith has definitely broadened just to see other people take interest in this, and not even people necessarily in our V3 circle, but even friends. Like I'll have friends that will listen to one of the podcasts and they'll send me a message, or they'll see a coffee post, or they'll see just something random V3 did and they'll send me a post. So it's really cool to see the ripple effects that has come out of it. And I think it's just such it's a great thing for me to be a part of. And I'm super appreciative of the opportunity.
Yeah. It feels that way. I love the way you describe the team. It's our team and all of our partners and even the V3 community. It's such an eclectic mix of people from all different backgrounds, life walks, all these journeys. What we share in common, we always say it, the vision is Jesus. And all of us encountering the person of Jesus. And we talk about that wondrously revealing Christianity, the hope of the gospel, and then inviting people to know God personally. And so you take a group of artists and visionaries and activists and poets and pioneers and people who want to see the life and beauty of the gospel spring up in the toughest places. And really amazing things happen in the midst of really heavy brokenness. And so we'll talk about both of that and maybe start with the thing that's in front of us. This lab initiative is aimed at seeing the life and beauty of the gospel spring up in this particular place of oppressed people and trafficked people. And unfortunately, in our moment, we are still confronting the reality of human slavery being the greatest organized crime, right? The greatest injustice of our moment is the trafficking, the enslavement of persons. And that it went down during COVID. So, but then it took a turn up. So I know that the studies and all of the data just came out from 2024, just to give us a sense of kind of where the current challenge is. What are the numbers telling us from previously, but when the report came out from 2024, what are we seeing?
From COVID, I think like most things, a lot of things stopped. So I do think we had that reprieve and that downfall in COVID. And then post COVID, when things started to open back up, we're actually 25% higher than we were pre COVID. So things have not gotten better, but it's not necessarily like we were talking before. It's not necessarily sex trafficking. It could be anything from like labor. So maybe, labor costs in different countries or different areas are getting tighter. So now people are being forced into labor situations where maybe they weren't forced in those situations before. So it's a very complex, but human trafficking is much more diverse than just sex trafficking.
Yeah. It's interesting that 25% uptick. If you look at the data that came out, they charted it from 29. You were kind of here, and then there was actually a decrease, as you said, in 2020 with COVID and the way the world changed, and there was not traffic and movement, so that maybe slowed things. Maybe it was underreported. Who knows? But the reporting statistics are back up 25% greater than what they were in 2022. So this is still, we're actively engaged in this, and every single one of you who are listening are a part of that, right? And what we hope to do is just through these conversations keep the issue in front of us. That's why I think January, being National Human Trafficking Awareness Month, is so good, because it puts it back in front of us as we start the year, to say again, these are real people. We always say, C.S. Lewis, this beautiful weight of glory language that he put out, that there are no mere mortals, no, not one. You've never met one. And for the gospel, human persons made in the image of God, uniquely shaped and formed in a mother's womb, life is precious, and we're a yes to life. And the life and beauty of the gospel is a powerful affirmation and yes to human life. And that's 61% of the victims of human trafficking, the data shows, are females, adults, and children. And I have the statistics somewhere on the breakdown, but it's so heartbreaking to think that 61% of that overall number are young girls. But then you think of the other side, and there's boys involved in that. When you heard that statistic, what jumps to your mind when you hear that breakdown of 61%? That leaves an entire other group that isn't talked about as much.
Yes, I was really surprised that the male part of that statistic was so high. I would have thought the female would have been closer to 80 or 90%. So it is really um, everyone can be affected. It's not just a female problem. It's not really just a young person problem. I mean, I think human trafficking is so diverse and there's so many threads we can pull on. You obviously have the sex trafficking, the labor trafficking, then you have like organ harvesting, you have, human sacrifice. And I think at those points, I don't think gender really matters if you're looking for an organ. So there's so many things and so many ways that it's not just a one person problem, and it's not just a one country problem. I mean, this is globally going on all over the world, and then even on a global scale, we haven't seen this at home, but when you have conflict, you have a lot of people who are without. If all the men are going to fight, the women and the children are left to fend for themselves, so they're vulnerable, and then they could get displaced or taken advantage of. So it really is a multi-tiered, multifaceted issue that really affects everyone, regardless of, race, creed, economic, situation. So it is something that we need to look at as a whole and not just try to be like, well, this is this problem or this is that problem. No, it's like everybody's problem.
Yeah. Yeah, and numbers can be so weird. It's important to use data and to think about it in terms of numbers, but always holding intention that every single person is a person, that it's a human life that is precious in the sight of God and also our neighbor. And that's the beauty of the gospel, is we say, who is my neighbor? All of these people are our neighbors. And what the gospel envisions is not a partial flourishing and delight. It's universal flourishing and delight, this shalom, this prince of peace that we just celebrated in Christmas, that shall reign. And right now we get to say that is the reality, post resurrection, Christ reigning, and he has defeated sin and death. And ultimately, he will reign. And we long for the day where everything is set right. And until then, we get to point to that day with our embodied lives and the choices that we make. And it impacts, I just saw the number, 39% of those 61 are adult females and 22% children females. So if you take that 61%, you say 39% of that 61, those are adult women who are being enslaved primarily for the purpose of sex trafficking. 22% of that 61 are children, female children being used and exploited for the purposes of sex crimes. And that's not just it's not just in ways that you might think or see in a movie, but even pornography and child pornography. I know Oak Rock Foundation is working hard trying to combat some of those areas. So we'll come back to Oak Rock's work and how we can help them. But it's good for us to think in terms of numbers, but people. And kind of shifting the conversation to partnerships, well, I was stunned by this fact that came out in the 2024 report that 74% of the perpetrators of human trafficking are actually involved in organized crime. So when they do the cases and when these prosecutions are made, 74% of the people involved in enslavement of people and exploitation of human persons are involved in organized crime, which is interesting when we think about the solution, right? Because if you think about William Wilberforce and the abolition movement and that end to a form of slavery, the idea is it's not just one person, but there was William Wilberforce, but then there was the Clapham sect. And so much good work has been done to identify that it's actually dense networks. It's actually the organization of people and institutions and a whole culture that starts to combat something and shift. And you see that on the other side, that it's organized crime. It's a very organized and intentional effort to enslave and traffic persons. So shifting the conversation, what we're trying to do with the lab initiative is think like that, not just think about individual choices, which are involved, but think about a dense network. So that's part of what we've done with Freedom Roast, is trying to stitch together and participate in more of a dense network fashion, a solution to that problem. So talk a little bit about Freedom Roast and the partnership with Buddy Brew, because I think it highlights that power of how a dense network forms.
So I think we're super lucky that we have a few avenues of a dense network. I mean, Christians as a whole, pretty dense network, but you don't have to be a Christian to participate. You don't have to be a Christian to drink Buddy Brew. So we also have the dense network of coffee drinkers, which can be pretty loyal, loyal
That's right.
fanatical people as they are. So yeah, God bless coffee drinkers. And then we have like the community of where we all are, and we're in Florida. Maybe you're listening, you're not in Florida, but you probably have a great network and community there where you could start something. And I think that is beautiful. But particularly on the coffee drinkers and the partnership in the community, the dense community, and really the organize we can do is it does start with an individual. So it's just switching your coffee purchases from what you're currently buying over to Buddy Brew. And if you are an avid coffee drinker, it's probably not going to be that big of a financial switch. I know there's a lot of great coffees out there, but Buddy Brew, the owners are Christian based. They do everything above board. So even beyond fair trade, which is amazing. So the farmers that they're getting the beans from are treated and provided a livable wage, like beyond a livable wage, which is incredible. And they actually have a relationship with those farmers. And then particularly the Freedom Roast, Buddy Brew has a bunch of different roasts, but the Freedom Roast that they partnered with V3 on, $3 from every bag of that sold goes to fight human trafficking. So this mountain that we're climbing of helping to end human trafficking can literally be solved with your monthly coffee consumption, and that's all it takes. So regardless of your religious affiliation or your faith or your beliefs or any of that, I think at the core of all human beings, we know that trafficking or taking advantage of another human being is not right inherently. Like, it doesn't matter what religion you are, inherently that's just not right. Well, we can rectify that with simply drinking coffee
Mm.
and good quality coffee. It's not just slapping a logo on something. It's actually good quality, and the company stands by everything that they do.
Yeah. I love that you brought in the justice side of how the coffee is sourced and roasted and transported. All of that is involved, but this is what we're saying. We talk about these huge numbers in this giant hill to climb of our day, right? The trafficking and enslavement of persons is the greatest injustice of modern times. Full stop. So this is an us issue. It's a global issue. It's a gospel issue that we can't say something with our mouth about the truth of the gospel without it calling us to participate in these incredible ways for justice, right? And both those are true, right? It's an announcement that God has acted and done something apart from us. We're not trying to make or earn or accomplish something in lieu of God. God has done something, and it's in light of his affirmation of the dignity of human persons. And it's in the image of God, then, who is a just God who acts on behalf of the broken, that then we follow in that way, sacrificially saying yes to life, right? In all these ways. And the dense, we say these terms and they can sound so abstracted and academic, but this is how change happens. Right? When you go back and you reverse engineer, how did big change happen? How did big movements happen? And in the abolition movement, well, it was William Wilberforce and a dense network, and trade began to shift, and economics were involved, and things eventually broke loose, and that impacts real lives and real people. We are going to see the same thing, and we are seeing it with things like the Lab Initiative. And it's not the only one, right? Cow and Wax Company, they've been on our show, Tim Tebow's Foundation, all these different organizations are working. That is one giant dense network
Yes, for sure.
that's all starting to coalesce. So we happen to have one piece of this with Buddy Brew and coffee, right? So the idea with drinking coffee is, how do we shift one consumer choice? And by shifting that one consumer choice, create a partnership with someone on the coffee side who will provide a common good on the other side of that consumer choice. So I will give you great coffee, ethically sourced and really well crafted and curated coffee. And in return, you will transact economic resource, and a piece of that economic resource will be directed directly back into fighting human trafficking and caring for survivors. That's what the hard work that Christina's done and that our team at V3 has done and that David and Susan have partnered with. Those are hard fought wins. So cheers to you and everybody else. Like, that's little by little. And scripture said, don't despise the day of small beginnings, right? Like, little by little, these things shift. And what we said at the outset was this partnership would create $3 every time someone engaged this purchase of Freedom Roast coffee. And again, those numbers seem small, but something happens when we all participate together. So you get to celebrate what happened just the other day at Buddy Brew. We got to be with Dave and Susan and talk about the back end impact of that.
Yes. So having that partnership with them and doing like a social commerce, and like you said, just making that one switch. And, maybe you're not even a coffee drinker, but maybe someone in your life is. You can always just give a bag,
Pass it on. Yep.
pass it on. But we were super fortunate to be able to meet with them last month, and they let us know what the breakdown was for 2024 on bags sold. And we sold 833 bags of coffee. And if you multiply that by $3, so they gave us a check for $2,499, which is awesome. So that
Amazing.
is a great baseline now that I have like a solid year under my belt and kind of know where we stand. I think that is a great baseline to start to like goals for 2025. And talking to Dave, he was like, I'd love to see this number get 10x. And I'm like, yes, let's do it. So, they're on board and they're really open to any ideas we have as far as how to get the word out. We're open to partnerships. We have several local Tampa churches that are serving Buddy Brew coffee, the Freedom Roast that have switched out their coffee for their congregation and their parishes, which is phenomenal. So if you're listening to this, and you would love to have your parish be a part of our V3 Buddy Brew family, please reach out to us. My email is Christina@vuvivo.com, and we'd love to be able to do that. We're also looking at participating in some events to have Buddy Brew on site to give out samples and ways awareness around that. And really, we're just looking for any avenues possible to provide some partnerships. So it's been super, super fun. Have a great team of a lot of ideas. And I think having 1 year of like figuring things out, all of us, not just me, but I think even Dave and Susan kind of reinvigorating, what their goals are for this. I think 2025 is just going to be a super incredible year.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so good. That $2,499 And again, I want to celebrate how beautiful this is because these are things that we're buying anyway, right? I'm already making a choice to buy coffee. So it's shifting this finite, like hairline little decision of my consumer choice says maybe even just once a month, I will buy one bag of Freedom Roast. That's 800 and how many bags?
833 total for 2020.
So
Mhm.
833 bags of coffee. And you go, okay, well, that's really small. And I say, absolutely it is. And you think about how many hundreds of thousands of people are in Tampa Bay. Now you extrapolate that out, how many millions of coffee drinkers. Then you across to the West Coast, Midwest, all the places that Riley can maybe dig this data up on the fly. But how many countries is Lab the podcast being listened to in? I think it's extraordinary when you start thinking. We see numbers show up from Germany and the Middle East and Europe and all of these different areas of the world. When all of those start to translate to little individual consumer choices, that number from 833 will go, they call it the J curve. The backside of that growth is going to go like this.
Yeah.
And it's just a timing thing.
Yeah.
52
52 countries. Yeah, that's
countries.
incredible.
Isn't that incredible?
And I'm sure, not to paint doom and gloom, but I'm sure all 52 countries probably have some sort of human trafficking
Yeah, it's a
issue.
global issue.
Yeah. So, I mean, to be heard in 52 countries is amazing. And I'm sure we can figure out how to get coffee to you if you're one of those 52 outside of the
Find a way.
US. We'll
Yeah.
figure it out. But yeah, I think it's just incredible to see the impact. And there's a book, I think it's Adam Grant, The Tipping Point.
Mhm.
So you just never know like what is going to be that tipping point. Maybe someone listening to this podcast today is that tipping point. Maybe they're like, oh, I actually have this connection, have this connection and this connection. And 6 months from now, we're like, what happened? Like,
Yeah.
where did this go? And I think that's just the exciting part of it. And I think back to your first question you asked me about faith, like I think that is a faith walk, is like you just have to do what we can, and it might seem small, but you never know when that tipping point or that
Mm.
J curve is gonna take off. And I think that's like the beauty, the excitement of it. That's
Yeah.
just so beautiful to be like, well, when is this gonna take off? And it's gonna be like, do you remember when? Do you
That's
remember
right.
when
Yeah.
the fewest bags we ever sold was 833?
Yeah. Come on. And that's the beauty. Like, what are we doing? That's the whole thing. People talk about there's a deficit of meaning and a disenchantment in culture. And there's a malaise that just settles in. And it feels like we're so disconnected and isolated and separated. And yes, true in modernity in so many ways. But things like this, and even the Lab, the podcast community and V3's community, it starts to become this dense network where you might be in Missouri or San Diego or Chicago or another 52 countries around the world that listens to Lab, the podcast. And we go, you are a part of the life and beauty of the gospel in the world. Now let's think and pray, ora et labora, work and pray. Like, how can we trust God with 5 loaves and 2 fish? So we have 833 bags. That turns into $2,499. Well, here's the exciting thing about V3's network. Because we are a partnership for strategic evangelism, people are supporting the work of V3 in so many different ways. And so because of our partnerships, we actually get to double that number.
Woo woo.
Yes. So now we have the resource to double the $2,499. So now we get to send a check to Oak Rock. You'll be delivering that check in just a couple weeks, I think maybe next week. We'll get to send $5,000 out the door to go immediately get back into fighting human trafficking, caring for survivors. And so it's exciting to think about this, and that we get to do it. Us together is the way. 5 loaves, 2 fish, seeing the life and beauty of the gospel in the world. So thank you to all of you who are our partners, ongoing partners of V3. Thank you to everybody who is purchasing coffee. And you mentioned a couple ways, but I want to pull on that thread a little bit because it's January and we get to think outside of the box. For a moment, right? There might be people listening in their offices, people who are attending churches, people who work for distributors or grocery, or think a little bit outside of the box. How do people get involved? If you're that person who has maybe it works in a corporate office and is already buying coffee, they know that their office is serving coffee. How does that person get connected to the wholesale process at Buddy Brew so that their company, maybe in Chicago, can start serving Buddy Brew?
So there's a couple of ways. If they want to, they could just reach out directly to Buddy Brew. They have great customer service. They're super easy to deal with. If they would like me to be the conduit, they can reach out to me again. Just email me, Christina with a CH at vuvivo.com, and I can help that process. But it's definitely being creative. I mean, we actually have a really good relationship with a farmer in the east part of the county, and he was willing to have the Buddy Brew at his store or his little like market. So people can literally get a one-stop shop. They get their fresh fruits and vegetable. They actually have some like organic soap and stuff, and then they can pick up Buddy Brew instead of coming all the way into the city. So we're hitting a whole other more rural demographic. So it doesn't have to be anything that's like super traditional. We can definitely think outside the box. But yes, if you have a school,
Mm,
a daycare, a church, a doctor's office. I mean, anyone who wants to drink not just good quality coffee, but coffee where you know your money is going to. I mean, as a consumer, our dollars are basically our votes.
mm,
And I can't research everything that I buy. I mean, that's all I would do all day if I just researched every single thing I bought. But I know that when I buy Buddy Brew, like the money is going towards a company that like I can stand behind and I can represent. And I know that they're going to be good stewards of the money, not just the $3, but like the rest of their profit. I know that they're going to be good stewards too. And I can't necessarily say that for every other company out there. So it really, being a consumer, we have a lot of power.
that's right.
And I think if we're already buying something, maybe it's not a budget change at all. Maybe it's the same cost of what you're already doing. Maybe it is a little bit of a budget change, but can you tweak your budget to match your values in 2025? And,
Yeah.
it is the start of a new year. Maybe you're working on your personal finances and you're trying to figure out, I want to give more this year. Okay, well, maybe you don't drink coffee. Maybe you want to drink coffee. So maybe you buy coffee and you donate the rest just to the general lab initiative fund. If you have, it's easy to plan if you like have a plan instead of like on a whim. So if you want to buy Buddy Brew coffee, like figure out how to get it into your organization's budget or figure out how to get it into your household budget. And then in our personal budget, I get 3 bags. We get 3 bags sent to our house. I do not drink 3 bags of coffee a month. So I always have an extra bag or two on hand to give or
Mm.
to share. And that's been super impactful. And people really appreciate just getting a bag of coffee because you were thinking about them or as a thank you gift. So that's super easy to do. Buddy Brew also can do custom bags. So if you have a corporate event coming up and you want your corporate logo on the Freedom Roast, what shows people where you stand on your values than giving them a bag of Freedom Roast coffee with your corporate logo on it. So they can do that for you. They can also do smaller, like the gift size bags. So if you have a wedding or something coming up, a party, they can do that. And then for some of our larger organizations, they have the large 5-pound bags of coffee too that they can get. So really, we're problem solvers at the end of the day. Like we will figure it out. If you want coffee, we will figure out how to do it. If you want to make a donation, we will figure out how to do it. Just reach out to us and we will figure out how to solve the problem.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so good. You brought up two things when you said schools. We just donated and with Buddy Brew, they may have donated it directly, a mug and some Freedom Roast for one of our kids' schools gala and
I love
fundraiser.
that.
So you might be getting ready for a school auction or something. Think like that. And how can our consumer choices be a part of this broader, dense network and this bigger story? And those little catalytic movements that can create incredible downstream impact. So I love that. And Buddy Brew also has a truck, and we've
They
talked
do.
about
Mhm.
going out and actually hosting events and tasting. I got to give a shout out to First Pres in the church here in Tampa. They actually had our whole team come to a church service on a Sunday morning. And when they made the switch to Buddy Brew, and we got to be in their lobby and talk to people who were a part of the church and just provide education so that people would know, hey, our church made this choice. And so even down to the coffee we serve, we are participating in the gospel in this way. And I loved
Yeah,
that.
such a fun congregation. Like, what a great church,
Yeah.
First Pres. So
Yeah.
it's super exciting to see like people be excited about the coffee they're drinking and not to be like, yeah, I came to church for my coffee and donuts. Like your church is exemplifying their values and what they're serving you,
Yeah.
which I think is so special.
And that was catalytic. I know Covenant Life now, there's other
Yeah,
churches
there's other
here
ones.
in Tampa now that are spinning off of that. So that's how it's going to happen. So, but it couldn't happen with just one individual. It is a dense network. It is thinking broadly and deeply about this. And it's also prayer. And last year, your word was prayer for the year. Like
It was.
Christina went into the year praying. And I just want to invite all of us to not neglect the reality of, all of our choices and dense networks and strategy and great people working behind the scenes. All of that is absolutely a part of it. And we're not on our own, and we get to pray about this. So if you could ask people to join us in prayer for particular things around the lab initiative, what's the call to pray?
So my prayer in 2024 was just for supernatural growth. I
Mm.
just basically gave it up to God and said, whatever you do, you do. And I think that that is a super easy prayer. If you want to get more if you're a granule prayer and you're like, I want to pray for every little person, I think praying for David and Susan
Mhm.
Ward and
Yeah.
Buddy Brew, praying for the coffee growers,
Mm.
praying for Oak Rock, praying for those who are currently being rescued, praying for those who are not yet rescued, praying for the whole ecosystem that is human trafficking on both sides. Even praying for the hearts of those who are trafficking to get their hearts changed, because I mean that's like a whole other thing. Is like what kind of person, what happened to that person to make them want to traffic somebody else? Because that's not a normal human thing to want to do. And then, pray for the V3 team. I will also take your prayers. So you can always pray
Yes,
for me
please.
as I, learn and fumble through this as we continue to grow this out. And just pray, whatever is on your heart. If you know someone specifically that's been affected, pray for them. Or if you want to be more like me and just give it up to God, just pray for supernatural growth. Like we will take that as well. So
I love that. That's one of the most powerful things I think about this podcast conversation is the way that it has stitched people together in from so many different parts of the country, so many different aspects of life and beauty. And it's so fun to ask people like, how can we pray for you? And to know that people who are listening to this podcast are praying for Dave and Susan, business owners who are making difficult choices to continue to be able to cut checks and to give back and to do things like that. That's the stuff that we go, what does the life and beauty of the gospel look like in the world? That's it, right? Like what God is doing in and through everybody. So cool. So great to spend the first podcast of 2025 really keeping this issue very front and center for us. And Christina, thank you for praying and leading in such a faithful way. I think that ending 2024, we're going to be able to celebrate a ton of things that God does. But already being able to send $5,000 out the door in the first month of the year to Oak Rock is a really, really beautiful thing. So thank you for everything. And thank you all for being a part of the Lab Initiative and the life and beauty of the gospel. And here's to what we can't yet see, right?
yes,
Yeah.
thank you.
Cheers.